So I think we are ready to start. We have a good number of people who have joined the meeting. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Grace Ingabire. I'm the CEO of Richter. It is my pleasure to welcome all the participants today for our webinar. I welcome all the eminent speakers who have taken their time this afternoon to just take us through their experience, their expertise, to the local community, to the registrars in Rwanda and across the continent, and other attendees in the room. So the theme of today is localized domain name branding, opportunities for businesses. And this webinar is being conducted in partnership with AFTLD, which is the African Top-Level Domain Name Association, and ICANN. Thank you for your usual support and your participation as well to our webinar today. Without taking much of your time, I would like to start giving the agenda of today, which will start with a brief and small introduction of Richter. I'm sure we have so many people in the room who don't know, some of them who don't know what Richter is and what we do, which will be followed by a keynote from our brother Barak from AFTLD. Then there will be a small introduction of our panelists today, who are Ivan, Moses, and Lucky. This will be followed by a panel discussion for where we'll have all the panelists together, and then a Q&A. So we encourage all the participants or the attendees in the room to use the Q&A or the chat section just to ask any question that you might have. So we are going to start with a small introduction of Richter. So Richter is a stand for Rwanda Internet Community Technology Alliance. We are a not-for-profit organization representing the Rwandan internet community. We are the manager of the RW country code top-level domain name, which is the Rwandan identity on internet. We are as well the manager of the Internet Exchange Point of Rwanda. So the RWCCTLD, which is the country code top-level domain of Rwanda, has an MOU with the Rwandan regulator, which is RURA, and we started our operations in 2012. We use the 3R model, which is the registry, registrar, and registrant as a model of operation. So the .rw registry has policies that guides our operations. And as of today, we have around 42 accredited registrars, which are normally the resellers of RW. 29 are across Africa, and 13 comes from outside either Europe or US. So the registration of RW domain names are done via accredited registrars. And as of today, all registrars or all our partners are EPP compliant. Today we have 5,441 active domain names. I wanted just to talk about some of the initiatives that are in place to grow the .rw domain name space. As I mentioned on the other slide, is that all our registrars or all our resellers are EPP compliant, which means all their systems are automated, which is a way which is convenient to our customers. That is, they can register and renew their domain names from their comfort of zone. So this year we are planning as well to have to integrate the mobile money to Coca. Coca is a platform that we use for RW domain name management. So we believe by having this, this will attract more players, especially in East Africa, whereby majority of the money transaction is done via mobile money. So this is an initiative that we have started, and we believe by this year, before the year ends, we'll have finalized on it. So this year we have opened up application for registrars across the African continent. Earlier on, 2 years ago, it was really hard to be one of our resellers. In a reason, those registrars who were not within East Africa, they were considered as international registrars. So in a way to grow our business and to improve our services as well, we have opened up to receive application for even other registrars in any country in Africa. So you can see a link there. If you are on the call and you are interested to be one of our registrars, this is the link. You can just get in touch with us, and then we'll take you through the whole process. Among other initiatives that we have in place, we have launched a campaign this year, which is called Digitize Businesses in Rwanda, which is a campaign that is mainly focusing on providing web presence or online presences to businesses that have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have seen an uptake. As of today, we have more than 500 signed businesses who are registered for that service, who have their web presence already online. And we believe we'll continue with this initiative up till the end of next year. And why not continue next year as well? RW in numbers, I just wanted to give numbers since when we started the operation back in 2012. If you can look at the graph, you'll see that we started with a small number, and that 700, the reason you are seeing it is mainly because RW was redelegated back to Rwanda in 2012. So we had some other domains that were registered earlier on, but since the service was managed abroad, that when we repatriated, this is the database, it came with around 700 domain names. So you will see the growth from 2012 to 2021. Today we are in 5,000. From 700, this is a journey of 10 years. We are in 5,400 something, but we believe we still need to do more, especially based on the number of companies that are registered within the country. We still have a journey to grow more. So today, as I mentioned in the introduction, the theme of today is localized domain name branding opportunities for businesses. So the objective of our webinar today is mainly to educate people who have attended on the importance of protecting their brand, especially using our local brand, which is .rw. Why did we come up with the theme? So while running the campaign, even previous years ago, we will see that we have so many local companies who still use the generic domain names. But again, let me say this, it's not bad to use .com, it's not bad to use .org, but we believe there is a lot of benefit that you can still gain while you are using your local brand. So today with the panelists that are coming across the continent, so we'll hear from them, why do we need to use a local brand? What do you gain? What are the value that is added to your brand? And we'll hear as well a case study of a successful brand, which is .za, on how they leverage on the country top level domain name. So without taking much of time, I would like to welcome our brother from another mother, Barak, who is the representative from the Africa top level domain name, AFTLD. So Barak, please, you are welcome for the keynote. We can see you now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All
Barak.
right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. Let me just observe all protocols for these virtual meetings. And thank you very much, Grace, for that kind introduction. I'll make a few words, but I won't bore you with a presentation because we have many presentations that are coming up. So as Grace has mentioned, Africa Top Level Domains Organization is the regional association for country code top level domain registries on the African continent, like .rw, like .bi, like .ke. Around the world, the internet is managed by way of names and numbers. And we have various regional organizations that actually take care of these names and numbers. So in Africa, for the naming space, we have Africa Top Level Domains Organization that brings together a country called Top Level Domain Registries on the African continent. Maybe there might be a few of us who may not understand what differentiates country code top level domain registries from generic top level domain registries. I know my colleague Bob is on the call. And also there is Lucky who will speak about both the country code top level domain and generic top level domain registries. The main difference is country code top level domain registries come into being as a result of a standard known as ISO 3166 developed by the International Standards Organization. So ISO 3166 determines what a country is and what a territory is. On the other hand, the responsibility to manage the key resources of the internet is vested in ICANN, or the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, icann.org. Bob is somewhere, I can see he's typing there. And they provide oversight, both for what we then call the generic top-level domain names, such as .com, and the country code top-level domain, from the perspective of managing the root servers, which is the common equalizer for all the top-level domains. But looking at a global scale, currently there's an organization known as VeriSign that always does research. And if you look at statistics, we currently have slightly over 300 million names across all top-level domains. That is either .coms, .rws, or .kes. If you look at the numbers keenly, it's called the domain name brief. We'll post the link in the chat, or Bob, if you are able to, you can share it in the chat. If you look at the way the names are spread out, you'll see that it's almost half of them are generic top-level domain names, half of them are country code top-level domain names. So there is value across the board. And of course, most of us, especially those that come from Africa, you know that we are very patriotic citizens. Our country comes first, our language comes first. In fact, in my local community in Kenya here, people argue that traditional vegetable tastes sweeter than that which is imported. You know, that vegetable that grows in the bushes around home. So it's the same thing with country code top-level domains, which are members of AFTLD. They are valuable, and they are valuable in terms of positioning local companies or local businesses in the internet ecosystem or in the internet scene. The internet is the new real estate. I think COVID has demonstrated that brick and mortar is not a matter of life and death. Right now, those that relied on shops, on physical shops, they're out of business, possibly sick somewhere in a hospital because of stress. You know, the problem is when your shop is closed, it doesn't mean that you stop paying rent. So you can imagine you are not selling, you are still paying rent, yet the internet is a free resource that is there. But let me not get into the presentations that are going to be made by our very eminent panel. As AFTLD, we believe in supporting our members. And how do we support our members? We help in organizing events such as this. And we not only help, we also participate and contribute to add value and also to just encourage local businesses to be more active in the internet space. In this case, I would say, because most of our audience is Rwandese, buy Rwanda, build Rwanda. When you buy .rw, you find that this money gets back to the local ecosystem. RICTA is the one that organizes the Rwanda Internet Governance Forum. How does it organize the Rwanda Internet Governance Forum? Through the resources that it makes, probably from selling the domain names and other internet services that it provides. So when you buy a .rw, you create an opportunity for RICTA to be able to impact more positively in the local community. And this is the reason why we are encouraging local citizens to actually buy local domain names, because this money comes back to you. While there's value in generic top-level domains, and I don't want to steal the thunder from ICANN, every time you buy a .com, you send money to the US. In Africa, we talk of brain drain, and we talk of, I don't know what else we are draining. We've been draining minerals, our brains, and now we are also draining domain names, or the little money from domain names. So I think buying a local domain name brings the resources back home locally, and it puts your country, or it puts, in this case, Rwanda, at a better position even to develop itself, to develop its internet further, because the resources are available. Otherwise, we have to be at the place where we are requesting for money from the IMF and all these other institutions. It's not bad to borrow, but you can imagine every time we borrow, it sets us back 10 years in terms of our ability to be able to develop. So I would really like to encourage, in particular, the local registrars and anyone else that is listening, that it's really key to take advantage of the internet, but more importantly, from a local perspective. It would be beautiful if we can have sites in Rwandese language on the internet. Right now, there's a conversation about universal acceptance that is going on in ICANN, but it is only the people from Rwanda who will be able to develop Rwandese sites. In as much as I want to develop websites that are in Rwandese, I don't know Rwandese or Kinyarwanda. The only language that we have in common is probably Swahili, and a bit of my French, which is comme ci, comme ça. So with those many remarks, I think I want to welcome all of us, and thank you very much, Grace, for these partnerships, and colleagues, Bob from ICANN, and everyone else that we worked together in pulling this. Let this not be the end. Let's do more of this, but I'm really looking forward to listening to the powerful panel that has been set up, and learning with colleagues. And of course, I'm also keen on making some business from Rwanda as well. If local people don't become .rw registrars, then Grace will request you to open up for us also from Kenya to become registrars, so that we also do the business. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Barak. By the way, Kenya is open. So you are, as I mentioned earlier, you are our brother. So you are free to become one of our resellers. So the next item on the agenda is the presentation that we are going to have from different panelists. So we are going to start with our local registrar, namely Ivan. Okay, so our first panelist will be Ivan Alia. Ivan is part of one of our resellers. His company is called EBD. He's a developer, a system analyst, and infrastructure engineer. He's a social entrepreneur as well. He has been with us for a couple of years. So Ivan, without taking much of time, you are welcome.
Thank you, Grace. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm just going to talk about our journey, what we've been through, how we started, and etc. Just to give you a brief idea about the power behind branding. So e-business developers, the name in itself was chosen to give an idea to our customers about what we do, even before we get a chance to talk to them. This was part of our branding process. This was part of our projection of where we want e-business developers to go. We want to be involved in other people's businesses, and this is why we picked that name. So just a brief about us. ABD is an ICT service provider. We focus on developing business solutions. So we really believe a lot in entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are changing society in so many ways. There's so many things that you probably would not be able to do in certain areas, but entrepreneurs have shown that they're able to do these things. So how do we participate? We work with these entrepreneurs by providing websites, mobile applications, systems, and this is just so that we can be part of their journey of entrepreneurship. So when it comes to branding, we also help them a lot when it comes to digital strategies. We do a lot of digital marketing to ensure that we put brands online and hence able to participate throughout their goal setting and achieving. So we have witnessed firsthand from the time we joined up to today, we have grown with Akadomora. We have seen the transformation of the Akadomo RW brand. So we joined the family in 2013. 2013 is when we registered ebd.rw. And this was right from the beginning. We think of our brand right from the beginning. So we registered ebd.rw for our corporate brand. And then we registered another domain, uvukwe.rw, which is for one of the projects that we started. This project really is about wedding service providers in Rwanda. So we have a directory where we have all these service providers. So in case you have a wedding coming up and you need people to do cakes, transport, photography, and basically most of those things required for the weddings, you find it on uvukwe.rw. So in 2013, 14, 15, we were not really registrars. We were just, getting into the space. But come 2015, we were accredited by Richter to start selling domain names. And this now helped us in the sense that when we would develop for our customers, we wouldn't refer them as we used to do before. We would give them the domains. And basically this marked the journey, our journey in the Akadomora, but really no one was moving with us. We were really alone at the beginning. People were not coming. They were not sure where we were going until we discovered Akadomo RW brand. So why did we come up with the brand? Grace can agree with me when we started back in 2012, and then when EBD joined 2013, 14, Akadomora was just .rw, okay? So once we put Akadomora brand, we began to see uptake. Our customers wanted to associate with the brand because it was now not just .something, it was Akadomora, it was our Rwandan identity. So from 2019 to 2021, you'd realize that we had more than 300% increase in domains. People would call us and want Akadomora. And hence we're still on the upward journey from that time. All our campaigns, we see more increase in Akadomora. So why Akadomora anyway? We have different perceptions of what a brand is. We all maybe understand a brand in some way, but a brand is a way you are perceived, the experience that your customers are expecting from you. The domain is more than just a name. You can't just say ebd.rw, uvukwe.rw, and that's it. No, there is a promise behind that name. You see, this brand is recognizable globally, and your customers are able to access it globally. So when a customer sees your name, when a customer sees your brand, when a customer experiences your brand online, there is something they expect from your products and services. There's something they derive about who you are. How do they perceive you? All this is something unwritten in your brand, but it is witnessed or it is experienced by your customers. So what do we look at anyway? We've had this with our customers, we've had it with our own branding for our projects. When choosing that name, we are looking at a name that is going to outlive the business, a name that is going to go beyond where the business is. So it creates this online identity of who we are. It connects us to our customers. It creates trust because when our customers see our brand, they're able to trust what we are going to offer. And the whole process of building a brand needs to be considered right from the beginning. You must secure your domain names early enough in the process of branding so that you can now build your business around this domain name. We have scenarios where you register business, you start going out, then you recognize that, oh, I'm missing something. Then you start going backwards. Sometimes it's too late. Maybe the brand name is already taken, the domain name is not available, or because you already registered your company and you're in a different direction, you now need to start tweaking your domain name to meet what you have. And yet you can involve everything right from the beginning to ensure that you are consistent in your branding. So what are some of the things that you need to look at? You need to keep this domain very simple and predictable. ebd.rw, you can remember it at any time. Even if I woke you up in the middle of the night, you will remember. When you have ubukwe.rw, one word, very straightforward. Keep it simple, keep it predictable. You need to keep it short and very specific. You know, when you read a domain name or when you go online and you check a domain name, very many times you're able to type it in easily or something like that. Whenever a customer has suggested to us a very long domain name, we do encourage them. We're like, no, you need to keep it short. We shouldn't assume all our customers know how to type. We also need to go for the domain extension, which is proper. In our case, Akadomorwa, you need to look at your brand locally. You need to consider using keywords. Ubukwe in the Kinyarwanda word has a meaning. And we chose that specifically because it talks to our market, as well as the last option of protect your business brand. Choose a name that protects your brand. Do not let anyone else use your name because it means you're losing business. It means they're taking away business from you in a way because they are using your name. So protect your brand. So let's have some use cases. We have a scenario where customers think a domain name is just for a website, which is not true. We have so many other things we can use the domain name for. It's your brand, it's your identity. So even if the first case is it gives you this global reach, yeah? Your domain is able to give you business across borders. See, so it is not uncommon that big brands across the world have a very strong online presence. They do. This online presence helps them to have that brand, which is recognizable anywhere in the world beyond the home country of the business. So for the case of website systems and emails, we have done this actually. We have customers who choose a domain name and then they choose another domain name. So this is one customer, but have more than one domain name. Why? Because they want a domain for their website. They want a domain for their online systems. They have a domain for, you don't have to be restricted to one domain. Just like we all have more than one name anyway. I think it's at least in Africa, I know African tradition gives us many names. Domain names, it's the same way. You don't need to have one. You can have more names for your different products, your different systems. We have ebd.rw as our corporate brand, but all our products, all our projects that we put out online, we give them a name. We brand them with their own Akadomorwa. So in this case, you find that if you are sending out emails, which are included in your address, you find that your name is there. Immediately it communicates to your customer. It creates trust. I am very personally skeptical when I receive an email from a another business person, and I can't recognize their brand in that email. It gets a bit different. So what do we expect from you? Whenever I receive an email with Richter.org, I know what Richter is. I know what to expect. So that also is communicated in your domain name. You pick your domain name and you use it across your businesses, across what you do. We have a lot of mobile. Nowadays, mobile is going to a whole different level. And we have customers who have a domain, and then we give them another domain for mobile. Why? Because at the end of the day, we are creating this cloud interactivity. We have your mobile, you're on the go, and your data is online somewhere. You have someone in office who's updating. So rather than use any URL which cannot be recognized by the customer, this domain name again is able to be used in your project. So you have your mobile application, but you're using your domain name in the URLs. So you keep your brand, okay? You're representing your brand across and hence creates consistency. Digital marketing. We have our digital marketing platform, gahunda.rw. Again, the name is well chosen. For people who are in Rwanda, they know the meaning. We didn't choose the name randomly. It's part of our long-term branding effort. So we use this for promotion, but then we are consistent. If you look at our social media platforms, you recognize our domain. Our domain is within the social media URL. So even while we are promoting, even while we are sending out information, we are making sure this domain name is consistent. This brand is consistent along our promotions. What does this mean? Our customers are able to recognize us. Our customers can recognize our brand in our URLs. So even if we are going across different platforms, you know, you're posting on different social media, you are still maintaining the name, and it means your customers are able to recognize you. So what does this also mean for our customers? Because we post on their behalf or we are promoting their products, but in the same way, they're associating with our brand. So a customer or someone who's giving you opportunity to promote their product, they want to associate with your brand if it's a brand that can be trusted. So that name, the domain name, is beyond just the name, I emphasize again, because it's representing us in so many ways, and also being able to go beyond just our business into our customers' business. So, are you ready to join the Kadomora family? Or are you ready to claim your Rwandan identity? Are you ready to take your business to a whole new level? Then you need to visit ebd.rw. You will find quite amazing packages that we've been working with in the past 6 months. So many customers have joined us, and I want to believe that their brand has not been the same since they chose Akadomora. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ivan, our panelist, our reseller of .rw. So we are going to welcome the second panelist, who is Moses Kemibaro. Okay, so our second panelist, as I mentioned, is Mr. Moses Kemibaro, who is the founder and CEO of .savvy, the Kenya's first digital business agency. So Moses is a multiple award, has won a lot of awards. He's a blogger and technologist analyst. Previously, he was the African sales director at InMobi, where he led the sales in Kenya. But since we have known, I know he's the person, or he's the big person behind the Kenik, the marketing of Kenik. So Moses, you are welcome.
Thank you so much, Grace, and it's such a pleasure to be here to talk about domain names, and again, a topic that I'm very passionate about, space that I've been involved in for many, many years. and being here today with Richter and everyone else who's taken the time to participate. I hope that we'll be able to share a little bit about what you can do to maximize branding and your marketing through your domain name strategies, and more specifically, local domains for the same. So I think if you can just pull up the, is it the full screen? And can go to the next slide. Okay, great. So as we're discussing today, we're really looking at the whole topic or area of local domain names and really trying to build a solid case around why you should have one and why it's now the time to consider. So I think the first reason here is really, whether you're going to have a .rw or maybe a .ke as we have in Kenya, or a .ug in Uganda, or possibly a .za in South Africa. You really want to give you a sort of a unique and transparent identity that consumers and other stakeholders can relate to in a contextual manner. We're seeing increasingly as the internet gets very crowded and also very generic, that having a sort of a clear identity online that sort of gives somebody an understanding of who you are, but also defines your geography or your country becomes very, very important. And especially as we're seeing the internet in the last year during the pandemic has become sort of central to everything that we do, your identity becomes very, very important. We've also seen that because the local domains have not been traditionally as popular as the international ones, such as .com, it's more than likely you'll be able to get your preferred domain name. There's not as much competition, and therefore it's more than likely as a business or even as an individual that you'll actually find your domain name with the extension that is relevant to your country or your market. You're then able to get many, many more choices. It's much, much easier to identify what you want or what you can get. You can have a uniquely branded and country specific identity. And we've also seen that when it comes to the actual cost, that it's actually cheaper in many instances to get a local domain name, the international one, or a generic global domain. Another thing, again, that has been mentioned here is that the revenue that comes from that domain registration is domiciled in the country where that domain name comes from. So there's also an incentive around actually making sure that that revenue is retained for those domain names within the country of origin. Next slide, please. So when you're acquiring domain names, you want to acquire domain names across different possibilities. One is for obviously your corporate brand, which would be the mother brand or the business brand. You could also be acquiring domain names also for your products and service. We see many, many clients and organizations we work with doing this nowadays. And for most part, it's about really protecting your intellectual property so that in the instance that you have a very popular product or service and you've not secured your own local domain name, you can ensure that that domain name does not become compromised as a result of the fact that you did not secure it. So you want to protect your brand equity for both your corporate brand as well as your consumer or product brands, just to make sure they're safe. And usually, again, with a local domain name, you can do that very easily. You also want to make sure that sometimes you might want to use those same domains for things like microsites or landing pages. So, for instance, you're running a campaign or a promotion and you want to then domicile the promotion within that specific domain. You can also do what we call domain name aliasing, where you might want to point a domain to several other domains or multiple domain names to one mother domain. And again, this is a protective strategy or defensive strategy for your brand, so that whether somebody else potentially could have registered your names, you're just able to reroute that traffic specifically to the central domain, which is where you'd have your content or website that is relevant. Next slide, please. We also find there's a phenomena called direct navigation, which is scenarios where people don't even bother to use a search engine to find you. This is where a brand is so well established or well known that the presumption is that the domain name that they're searching for, or rather they would type in directly into the browser, is actually going to be a brand. A lot of people actually do this quite often online. In fact, I think I saw some statistics saying quite often as many as 10% of your traffic visitors will come directly through a domain name versus searching for it. And if you've already done the protective strategy of registering your domain names and using those brand names in the domain name itself, then there's a high likelihood that many people can then be navigated directly to your websites or microsites or landing pages. And I'll give you a case in point where currently, if you look at KenyaAirways.ke versus Kenya-Airways.com, if somebody is doing direct navigation, it's highly unlikely they're going to type in Kenya-Airways.com. Chances are they'll possibly type in KenyaAirways.ke. And as it turns out right now, the main domain name used, I think, under Kenya Airways is actually the .com one, but I do believe they've also registered these other domains. But again, it takes advantage of the fact that you can have direct navigation, and when people alias and point that domain name to the mother domain, then you have the opportunity to make sure you do not lose that traffic. When you're publishing also your collaterals, your print, billboards and so forth, another thing that we highly recommend is that your domain names are always published on your offline and online media. If you have a social media profile, always make sure your website link is there, your domain is visible. If it's print collaterals like your business cards, letterheads, and so forth, always make sure the domain name is also reinforced in that space. And the beauty about that is, again, where you have visibility, if the domain name is there, then somebody is more than likely to open their phone and in that instance actually try and look and see what your business or your brand is all about. So again, just making it very easy for people to then find you, not necessarily by going through a search engine, but literally by seeing some communication, some assets, some marketing collateral, and then you're able to then push them directly to your website. We can go to the next slide, please. When it comes to domain name branding, you want to choose local domain names that are consistent with your brand rather than generic ones. Again, we want to make it very easy for people to find us and engage with us. We also want to look at domains that will give us more brand value and consumer recognition than generic domain names. We also know for a fact that one of the signals that Google looks at is what words are contained within your domain name. So if it's consistent with your brand, it's one of the signals that you look at when it's looking at the actual name of the domain name. But also the domain name extension of choice also does have an implication for how you're ranked. So again, it's also good SEO practice to make sure that the extension is specific to your country, and also that the name itself is specific to your brand. So that gives you, again, opportunities to get a more improved ranking on search engine results because of the fact that those elements are captured. Keywords in your domain name is also a signal that search engines use to rank you. You also want to ensure that where it's possible, acquire domain names that are more concise and short, because this gives you, again, better brand memorability when people need to access your website or if they want to send you an email. Again, it's very easy to make a typo when somebody is typing quickly, possibly on their computer or even on their phone. So you want to make sure that you want to limit that possibility of people making a mistake when they're trying to enter your domain name, whether it's in an email address or a website. So again, try and avoid hyphens and numbers. Again, we want to make it very simple and concise. We often say in digital marketing, don't make me think, or rather it's a phrase we say that customers don't make the customer think, make it easy for them. And then also make sure the domain names of choice are easy to type and also to pronounce, so that, again, it's easy for somebody to remember it and also key it in a way that is quite intuitive. Next one, please. So branding is key. Local domain names are important for professional communication, such as branded email addresses and websites. We live in a world where now, again, more than ever, we are digital, and we want to make sure that when we send communications to people, you'll be taken much more seriously if you're sending from a domain name rather than using something like a Gmail email address, which everyone has, by the way. But ultimately, if you're doing serious business and engaging with serious organizations, if you're sending off a dedicated domain name versus a Gmail address or one of these free email addresses, you'll be taken much, much more seriously when you're sending it off your own dedicated domain name. And also when you're registering a domain name, and this is very important, make sure you do not fall foul of any trademark issues or intellectual property laws. Again, in various markets and countries, if you do that, then there's a high probability that you might be compromised. I know in Kenya, for instance, where we have KENIC, there's a very strong dispute resolution process. So if you, for instance, found that somebody had squatted on your domain name, they registered it and are using it for other reasons that are not relevant to your organization or not within the authority of the organization, you can actually follow the dispute resolution policy and find a way to get that domain either revoked or passed on to yourself. And this is something that you find, again, when you're dealing with some of the global top-level domains, such as .com. It's very unlikely they would allow you to do that. But within a local context, then it's very highly probable that you can protect your intellectual property because of such strong domain name protection procedures and policies that can actually ensure that you can protect then your namespace within the local context. Please continue. So other key considerations, in other instances where you can't find a local domain name that's relevant for you, it is possible to use a domain name brokerage, either locally based or an international one, who can help you acquire you a domain for your brand or your organization. So again, in those sort of instances where you use a brokerage, you might find that the domain name will come at a premium, especially if it's something that's highly coveted or very popular, depending on the name you've chosen. It's also possible to use what we call domain name exchanges or marketplaces, where you can also trade in pre-registered domain names. So some people speculatively buy domain names almost the way you buy a piece of land or property, and they sit on that domain name without necessarily doing anything with it. But when somebody finds a need for it and is interested in that domain name, then a domain name exchange, if that domain is listed there, gives you an opportunity to sell that domain name at a premium. So some people actually trade in domain names, and this practice also exists within local domain names as well. So again, there are also business opportunities around the possibility of buying and selling domain names for marketing purposes, for revenue purposes, just as we would when we're selling pieces of land when it comes to real estate. And I think that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much, Grace.
Thank you very much, Moses. We are going to proceed with our final panelist, who is called Lucky Masilela. Our panelist, Lucky Masilela, he is currently the CEO of .za, which is the Central Registry of South Africa. And as actually, he holds both positions as well, the CEO of the registry .africa. So Lucky is also a former chairperson of the South African Communication Forum. So he has a lot of a vast experience in the telecommunication sector, being employed by CMS Telecommunication, then later Nokia and others.
Yes,
so in a nutshell, just to summarize, I know your CV, you have a lot there. Let us just welcome you.
Thank you, ma'am. And again, I think it's a pure pleasure to be in this panel or equally on the webinar. And I'd like to thank the panelists who have presented earlier. Spot on, you have laid a very good foundation for the continent to benchmark on. And Barack, of course, he's a natural when it comes to this space, Thank you all and Grace for organizing this. I presume we will learn a lot, equally for us seated here in cold South Africa. We are learning we learned quite a lot from the presentations thus far. If I may proceed and talk about us and the story in the next slide. This is just to paint a story of our organization, where we come from. It's always beautiful when you tell a story. And that story will then show how we got to where we are. In 1988, this is when this entity, then your NPCs were known as Section 21 companies in South Africa. Uniforum was established. It was pretty much a bunch of engineers that were looking, were working on different open source platforms and also working on skills development. And when there was transformation that took place, taking place in South Africa, we got our independence or Freedom Day in 1994. So there was quite a lot of changes that came in there, which required new policies to align to the Constitution. And one of the entities that had to be addressed was the ownership of the name .za, who was owning it. At that point, the name .za was owned by an individual, and the government had to work towards moving the ownership of the name .za to to government or appointing an institution that would be owned by stakeholders and the citizens of South Africa. And that entity became your ZEDNA, which was established much later than 1995. But in 1995, this is where the name handover from Uniforum, sorry, from this individual who was running or administering the namespace, he handed it over to Uniforum to begin the administration of the namespace co.za, including the administration of this top level name .za. However, over time, the government then allocated .za to ZEDNA, and co.za remained with Uniforum. In 2012, there was an innovation of introducing EPP as a technology, and equally looking at broadening and widening the scope and the management of the domain names. We had identified the scarcity or the lack of investment in domain names around the names web.za, names like org.za. They were not growing, they were not secured. And this is when the concept of a central registry was introduced. And in 2012, the entity ZA Central Registry was established. This is now was tasked with managing your co.za, org.za, web.za, and net.za. So we had 4 products under our management. But now, just to show you the history of one of the 4 products, let's go to the next slide. Next slide, thanks. Oh, sorry, these are the core functions, just to uh, give you a picture on what we do as our core functions. Uh, we look after the back-end entity, which we have outsourced. So we are looking at third-party contracts. We are responsible for the who is, which today will be migrating into what you call RDEP, if we're using too many acronyms, but it's pretty much your directory services, so that you can search for your name and find your name if it's there, or if it's not there. We are also responsible for this extensible provisioning protocol. This is a protocol that's responsible for automated system for registration of names. That's the one we prefer in South Africa. Parallel to this, we have what we call a legacy system, which is running on your web platform. Then we have data escrow services, which is a requirement for backup services. And then we also provide the rights protection mechanism, and we do registrar accreditation. So these are some of the functions that we do. I think you can read through, colleagues. If I can go into the next slide, please. Now, so from the history of the first name being registered in 1995, or 1990, actually 95, the first names were on New Year's Day. You can see that we had a gradual growth. There was a point where we were registering 1 name per week, and this translated to 2 names and 3, and we have grown since then. So if you look at this graph, you will see that this is now looking at just a single product, co.za, what it has done in the last 25 years. We have a legacy system that is running from 1995 all the way into 2011. And in 2011, we introduced EPP. And from then on, we saw the increase in domain name growth. What has happened in between 2012 to 2016, there was a lot of registrar training, there was a lot of registrar capacitation and marketing, to develop marketing strategies jointly with our registrars. And also we address the issues of pricing. So in that period, 3 things that happened that changed significantly or improved the numbers. If we go to the next slide, you will see what has been happening on the year to year. So again, the picture, the previous picture is the growth over the period, and this picture here was showing you the annual growth. So the journey begins in 2007. You can see there is a growth which peaks in 2011, 2012. That is when those major initiatives were pulled into the organization. And more than anything, really, I think was the introduction of EPP and also spending quite a lot of time training our registrars. So in the past, we had limited number of registrars that were playing in the space. And during this period, we opened up our floodgates. We brought in more registrars, and also we touched the price of the domain name per year. Using our currency, we were offering a domain name for at least 100 rands, which today could be $7 roughly. And today the domain name is selling per year to the registrars for about $3.50, which is quite affordable. And we think that was a game changer. And thereof, we have seen also a change in the market, which we will show in the next slide, please. Now, one of the critical things in our market is renewals. Whilst we thrive on creates, people coming in, buying a domain name, the most critical test is a renewal. When we see any growth in a month, we always would look at the same period a year later, at the same month, to see how many renewals have happened. So this is an age analysis to demonstrate that we are still seeing quite a good number of renewals, which is very critical in our business. Just to cite an example, the year 2020, it showed a huge increase in our numbers. Normally, we would see a growth in the region of 70,000, or sorry, 40 to 50,000 names per year. But the last calendar year, we saw up to 70,000 increase in the name registration. So this, we need to test it again post-COVID and see what would happen in terms of the renewals. If we move to the next slide, please. So this is what fed into the current numbers that we have in co.za namespace. Your legacy system, which is the platform that you can run yourself, it's web-based, was run by individuals. So individuals were participating and creating their namespace. And when it came to the year 2011, 2012, this is where EPP came in. This is where the registrar concept came in. This is where we had multiple registrars that were participating in the space. And once the registrars were trained on EPP, we saw a migration from the legacy. The legacy then numbers reduced and they grew, or they were feeding onto our EPP system. And this is moving from a single registrar to a larger pool of registrars. Your legacy registrar is a single registrar that was known as Uniforum, but we have seen the names grow and be handled or administered by the 500 plus registrars, which are responsible for our market and our growth today. If we go to the next slide. So these are the other products, how they are performing. Org.za obviously is the next stellar performer after co.za. Co.za on its own is sitting close to 1.3 million names. And then the other numbers are added by web.za, org.za, and net.za. If we go to the next slide to show also the split, the contributors, channel partners, This is critical area in our market. We need to make sure that this market is properly enabled, greased, trained, and empowered and capacitated to provide the service to the end user. We currently have, as I said, over 500 registrars who are provisioning our names, your co.za, org, web, and net. And the split is we have, as you see, 74% which are in South Africa, and the delta are foreign. And we think this is an area of growth for all our namespace, including our GTLDs. If your registrar market is not strong or big enough, you are unlikely to get the volume, your product into market. This is the shopping market. This is a market, where people can find products. You would see that registrars today do not have allegiance as much as they had in the past because of the number of names that are available. In the CCTLD space, they can offer any CCTLD across the continent, and they can offer any GTLD across, which are currently, available. There is over 1,900 GTLDs that are out there in the market. So the competition for the market becomes very strong. So keeping very close to registrars, partnering with them, coming up with campaigns with registrars becomes essential in this regard, so that your product stays on top of the shelf or it is more visible. And having regular campaigns is also a magic to turning the tide. Next slide, please. Not only the market, some of the things in the back end that we rarely talk about. I thought that I should bring these things up front because they are a game changer. They give comfort that if I wake up in the morning and I start my car, it will start. And if I drive, it will take me to where I'm going to. These are part of our performance standards, our service level standards that we adhere to. As you can see, we've never had downtime. I always touch wood on this one. So we are not known in South Africa. People know co.za. They do not know who is ZA Central Registry or ZACR. They know the domain name. And we are happy that they know the domain name. And what makes us happy is because of the reliability of the service and the fact that we are always providing uptime. There is never downtime. And touch wood that tomorrow we are not hacked nowhere. So across the service level standards that we measure, we are achieving above target. Thank you. Next slide, please. I would like to share some of the milestones, as a registry operator. So in the growth, if you look at, we almost believe that we gave birth to ZEDNA. The regulator today, ZEDNA, was created after we were created. And we also gave support to the ZEDNA to make sure that it can perform on its functions. And also we became the first, my apologies, and also we became the first central registry model entity operator. And that on its own is very critical and important because we are able to bring in scale. We are able to use that very scale to bring in security features and investing once for 4 products. If it were to be any other entity externally having one product, they would have to invest multiple times on the same product. And in this instance, because of the 4 products, if we bring in registry lock, we research once, we develop that solution once, and we apply it across the 4 products. If we bring in DNSSEC, we bring it in on one product and test it and apply it, implement it across the 4 products. So this is also the other advantage that gives us the scale and the strength and this financial muscle to be able to afford on some of the investments and innovations that we are currently looking at. And we also in 2014 opted to invest on this Registry Africa, which is an entity that is responsible for the administration of .Africa, .Joburg, Cape Town, Durban, but more important, it was .Africa. And this is a clarion call that came from the African Union that you would recall that in the first round of names in um, before 2011, there was no .Africa that was included. And the second round of names, which is now called the new GTLD round, it is through an initiative of the African Pioneers, African Strategy Group, that .Africa was then to be included in this new GTLD scheme. And we applied for this, and we prevailed, again, through the support of the continent and the African Union. And if we look at the other plans that we have put in place, we have decided against the .Africa strategy and growth of our registrar community. We are now embarking on a reseller program. You can talk to us about our reseller program. This enables any registrar on the continent to be able to sell the domain name .Africa. You don't need to be accredited by ICANN. You can be accredited by AF proxy, and there is no cost for accreditation. The only thing that you need is to go through the accreditation process. So for some of us, this brings a lot of ease in bringing in new namespace. So the other issues I think you must have been reading on your own. I just wanted to emphasize the transition areas, and if we can move to the next slide, please. Future trends. I think the future trends for us it's the third bullet point that I want to talk to that has really changed for our business. We have been toying around this idea for over 7 years, and finally government allowed us to do exactly what we've been requesting. We approached a registrar of companies and we said, this is the gate. This is where companies enter the market. And if a company is registering for its own company name, they need to be allowed equally to register for a domain name that will be associated with their company. And once they have done that, we are catching them right at the nip, and it's very strategic. And easily in South Africa, we have about 200,000 plus registrations of companies or companies that are registered. So if we were to get 10% of those at the gate, we think we would increase the domain name growth in the country. We've been talking about security. We've been talking about DNSSEC. It's probably a thing of the past, which talks to DNS abuse. We have now recently launched the registry lock, which enables you to have your name secured and reserved for your own self. And we think what we have not done sufficiently on the continent is the promotion of premium names. And I know Moses spoke about brand and brand visibility, and he has emphasized, issues of the real estate and what's important for us today. And we think that is a space to be playing in and focusing on the premium names. Next slide, please. I think I have one or two slides to go, or probably the last slide, Chair. Now, as a parting shot, these are some of the considerations. These are some of the things that we can almost say that they have been very instrumental in our success, or they were the building blocks for our success. Our policy. Our policy has been customer friendly, has been easy to implement, and has been open and enabling for external registrars to come in. And we believe if we can have policy harmonization across the continent, that would also bring about growth of domain names across the continent. Technology is another thing that you would recall when we're talking to our growth, where we have the web base and then the EPP, and then provisioning of training, where different training levels from your introduction to DNS to your advanced DNS. This resulted in the uptake of the EPP. We realized that our registrars were better capacitated. And if we have a common technology or technologies that we can see that can be provided to our registrars across the continent, we believe that can bring the growth that we'd like to see. Price is everything. It's a very sensitive thing. We are competing against free names like your Gmail accounts. Now, if we are still going to be having price differentials that are in the range that is astronomical, we are really taking away a lot from us and enabling the continent to be growing. The operating model, harmonization of that, I am glad to say that it has become more evident, and that across majority of African countries, they have now adopted the triple R or the 4R model, and this is what we use. And I think it's important that we hold hands on this model, because when we separate government from operations, it makes it easier for trust. People can trust the name, people can subscribe to the name, people can own the name. But once government is seen or suspected to be the operator, people will migrate and go to your .coms, and we are assisting the flight of our citizens. We need to manage this. And on this note, Chair, I think this is my last slide on issues of policy, technology, and operator harmonization. And I thank you. The next slide is just to show our good friends AFTLD, what they look like. And I thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Lucky, for a very rich presentation. We have had to learn a lot from you, from South Africa, especially that you're already in millions of domain names, which is an experience that we would like to hear from us. So the next session is mainly to discuss about some of the questions that came up from our community, our registrars who would like to learn more about the experience and expertise from you guys. So the first question will be addressed to all panelists. And it is mainly, it came when we were running this campaign since we launched it in January. And we had a sales agency moving around shops in town and trying to sensitize businesses to go to adopt an online presence on RW. And they were meeting so many agencies, so many organizations who are already on .com, on .org. And now the question came to us now, how do we handle these guys? So how do we convert, or what is the strategy that we can use to push these guys, or to make them understand why they need to protect their brand, though they can still use their .com and their .org, but they still protect their local brand, which is RW. So what message can we tell them? And if I can go further, what is the value proposition that we can bring out for these people to protect their brand? So this is an open question. I think we can start maybe with Moses, then we give a floor to Lucky, and then our last panelist can give his comment, who will be Ivan. So Moses, as someone who's coming from a marketing perspective, can you tell us what we can do? And I believe this is not a case in Rwanda. It's a case that is across all CCTLDs in Africa, where they are seeing this challenge, as if I can call it challenge, as Barack called it. When you pay for a .com or a .org, that money going out of country. But when you pay for your local brand, that money that stays in country. So how do we convert these people? What message can we tell them? What is the value proposition that we can take to them?
Thank you so much, Grace, for your question. Highly appreciate it. So I think maybe there are several points that come to mind. And, as we try to encourage many people who have traditionally gone for an international or a GTLD type of domain extension, I think for me, the first one is we're seeing a situation, I think, especially in the last year, where people are now taking the internet and digital platforms much more seriously. And the phrase we use is digital transformation, right? So suddenly people who traditionally and organizations that weren't as digital as they are today, doing things like we're doing today, like webinars and having domain names and so forth, are doing them for the very first time. So for me, in that context, then there's this opportunity then to create this unique identity for your organization as a brand, as an organization online. So I would say that first of all, it's about that unique and special identity that you can only get under your CCTLD. I think there's a question of availability, the ability to get the name of choice, the ability to get names that you could never get under .com. The third thing I think about is, when I think about it, is probably affordability. The idea that, again, in many instances, we are now seeing that CCTLDs across Africa are charging rates that are cheaper per domain name than what you'd pay for an international or GTLD type of domain name. And I think more importantly, more and more, we're starting to get to a point where we don't want to be a plain vanilla brand or organization. We don't want to be generic so that people cannot sort of domicile us to a particular market or country. In fact, I would say that locally we're seeing scenarios where consumers are now gravitating towards local content. And if you're going to be publishing local content, for sure you want it to sit under local domain name. And this carries everywhere from people such as digital influencers all the way to large corporate organizations and government. And consumers are starting to expect brands and organizations to actually have a local brand or local domain name, because that would then give them the right positioning and identity that they can relate with. And I think another thing that comes into this is probably authenticity. People are increasingly looking at authenticity, because when somebody is a .com, there's a high likelihood that sometimes such a domain name that's easy to grab and use, it also lends itself to fraud. And when you have a local domain name, then really you get a sort of a reassurance that this organization is authentic, it's locally domiciled, and if they do something strange or odd, then there are ways of getting some recourse in that, because they're domiciled locally. So I'd say those are the 4 or 5 things that come to mind for me.
Thank you, Moses. Lucky, I think you can just jump in as well.
Yeah, no, thanks there, Moses. They are fundamental things, really. It's almost creating a proud citizenry again, and it's almost playing into issues of being patriotic, the love for your name, the love for your flag, the love for your national anthem. It's those low hanging fruits where we start. And as NPCs, I think it's investing back into communities. Communities have to know that we exist. Number two, we have seen across a number of countries where even government officials or government offices, you would be amazed to see that they use your .com to communicate. You find a senior official using a Gmail in an official correspondence. We need to make sure that they stop doing that, they desist from doing that. And you have your state-owned entities. I believe Kenya Airways is probably partly owned by the state, which is a .com. We need to have those carry the right name, the right color. They must complete. I don't know. I think Rwanda Air, it's using .rw. I hope. So it's also both. They can do .com for protection purposes, but RW must be their main domain name. And we need to be looking at those influencers in the market. And government is a major influencer in terms of the uptake of a name. And also, there's a multidiscipline of registrars. Our registrars are not necessarily just providing your wholesale, your retail, or your domainiers, or your brand, or your corporate registrars. Those entities, they need to be they need to be magnified in essence. People must understand the role that they play, especially your domainiers, the guys who create a value of a domain name. We still don't have a culture of having multiple domain names. We need to introduce the culture of having more than one domain name, and also get those domainiers, those guys who are speculating on names, who are catching names as they expire, and resell them at a higher value. That creates value on the namespace on its own. And yeah, I think those are some of the things that we think would assist in that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lucky. Ivan, you are still on the call. What is your thought?
I would like us to emphasize identity because it seems on the market, from what we have realized, or from our interaction with customers, they don't really feel like they own this thing, okay? And that sense of feeling is what we need to instill in these people. Because if you look at again, back to our traditions, we do pass on names. And these names carry more than what we see in face value. So within our community, this is one thing that we're really looking into, that part of feeling like we belong. Because the minute we get that, then we have been seeing, this is what I said about our uptake, about where we are coming from and where we're going. We see more people identifying with this. So while we proceed, we really need to focus a lot on this identity concept and make sure that our people are getting there. And you see, it is very easy to register these domains. This is one thing that we have also been working on in the past. When it comes to price, yes, we are price sensitive, but how easy is it to register? So the ease with which we can register the domains has also supported in this uptake, and is something that we need to also make easier, if I might say, welcoming other people into the space where we can sell. And then there is the part again of resale value. There is this reluctancy that we've also had, where customers are sure the name will always be available, they can get it anytime. So I like what I want to be with Lucky on the side where they should know that it may not be available tomorrow. It gives them a sense of wanting to own it today, and they look at when is it expiring to ensure that it's renewed. That way we will have less deletions in the sense. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you, Ivan. I think I'm taking notes. So the second question will be mainly addressed to Lucky, which will be more about the main name retention. So Lucky, we have heard from your presentation, we have seen that you are already having more than 1 million domain names. Can you share with us, even the registrars from other countries who are present here, your journey to retain these customers over years? Especially that majority of our CCTLDs in Africa, we are currently facing a niche where domain are not renewed on a yearly basis. So we have a lot of people dropping over the year, a lot of deletion that we cannot handle. Some of them you try even to push to see how you can to get a solution to that, but you finally don't get it. So from your experience as .zae, how did you manage to retain those customers over the years?
Thank you. I don't think there's a magic wand to this, but it starts on a simple thing here. It starts with trust. I always acknowledge the corporate, South Africa corporate, that they are the ones who popularized co.za. They are the ones who started dropping.com. We saw a huge reduction in the .com in South Africa. Today, we have less than 80,000 .coms registered businesses. So that is a good sign, and we would want to see that number reduce further, Two, the thing that has made our corporate renew their names is because we have provided a reliable service. When I showed that slide on service level agreements or service level deliverables, that is critical. We do not drop the ball on our clients. We make sure that internet is up day and night. We ensure that we have customer service. We have our own call center in-house. And I always tell the call center agents, our staff, they are staff. They're not agents. They're not people who are just dealing with clients. I tell them that that is your bread and butter. After you have responded to the queries, I want the line manager to follow up, do a random sampling, and then follow up and call the end user and say, have you been assisted satisfactorily? Now, most of the time, the issue of tickets, a ticket is initiated by somebody who needs service. And guess who closes the ticket? Is the call center agent. I said, no, we cannot have the call center agent close the ticket. We have to have the very person who initiated the ticket close the ticket, and closing it by saying, I am happy I have been served properly. So it's these practices of going back to your clients and talking to them. Now, as a registry operator, we also have these regular engagements with our RAS, with our registrars. We want to understand their burning points, understand their challenges. So we had a function that that was called iWeek. I know my colleague Barak has attended a few of these iWeeks. They enable us to have a day where we engage with our registrars, and we also have a visit. But now what we are doing, we are now having a I day. It's going to be one day. It's no longer going to be an I week. People don't want to travel a lot. People are scared of COVID, etc. And we are trialing this for the first time next year, where we are going to do I week. So what am I saying? It's the security. It's celebrating the people that have renewed 5 times. Make sure they renew 6th, 7th, 10th time. I can remember on the 10-year anniversary, we sent out personalized gifts to all the registrars and registrants, some of the registrants that we knew that had registered more than 10 times their names, and we were giving them personalized gifts so that, wow, they know me. I'm not just a number or just a name in the registry. So it's a lot of pushing and pulling and empowering the registrars that propels or feeds into the renewals. So that slide that we were showing of the age analysis is an area that we look at very closely. And in the next few weeks, we will be looking at all the entities that are 30 years. And those 30 years, they will be receiving personalized gifts. We will be dropping things at their doorstep so that they become the holders of these names. A name that has been renewed 30 times has a lot of value in it. If it gets lost, it's a premium name in my view. Whoever will get to sell it will sell it at a high price. So this is a part of the thing in retaining, And finally, Chair, the thing that I spoke about, every citizen must feel secure. If a citizen is having a domain name and they're not feeling secure about their data, about their information, then they will go to a place where they feel more secure. We need to make them feel safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those highlights. I can see on the chat and Q&A, there are a lot of questions that just came in. Since we are running a bit of time, we are just going to go through a few of them. I can see a question that has been raised by Bob. Could the panelists comment on the responsibilities for marketing across the names value chain? Where does the greatest responsibility for marketing lie? Is it the registry, the registrar, or resellers? And what roles could other stakeholders in the local context play? So this is an open question to the three of you. Anyone can just jump in.
Maybe let me start so that I give the .rw perspective. This to us is a shared responsibility. We have a lot of support from the registry, a lot of support from the registry. However, the registrar is company facing. We're the ones who face the customer. We are the ones who go out. We have our agents talking to the business owners. So even if we do have a shared responsibility, I would want to vote that as registrars, we are like ambassadors out there. We take a bigger responsibility in terms of marketing these domain names. Another thing, for example, we have some registrars who in themselves do not have the brand. So how are you marketing a brand that you don't use? How do you ensure trust to the customer when you do not have that? So it starts with us, the registrars, to ensure that we are carrying this brand, we are using this brand, we give value to the brand. And then we are able to let our customers know that there is value in using it and they can trust the brand as well. So I would vote for the registrars to really put in a lot of effort in ensuring that we carry the flag, put in a lot of effort to create value around this brand, help our customers actually choose these names. We have scenarios where customers do not quite understand the choice of names, how to do it, how to protect the brand, how do we pick a name that really promotes the business. And this falls a lot to the registrar side.
Okay, anyone else wants to jump in? Moses or Lucky?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So that's a very interesting question. I also see a number of questions directed at me by an anonymous attendee, so I'll also answer those. But yeah, the marketing effort, I think, is a combination of stakeholders. I definitely think that the registry has a role to play. The registrars also independently, because their marketing or reselling do have a role to play. But I think also when you start thinking about the value of a domain name, especially when you think about it as a national asset, I start to think that the government and also any government affiliated branding agency or business agency would also be, should have a role to play in that sense, because it's almost the same way that, we have this phrase that is often used in countries, buy local, build local, where we're trying to create more local content around our activities across different industries and sectors. So I think they too have a role to play from that point of view, where government can also spearhead and also influence, domain names to be local. Case in point, and I think this is in Rwanda. I know that it's something I read about recently, where I think there's mobile devices being made by Maraphones, where the government of Rwanda has made it a mandatory that all phones purchased in the country for government use, smartphones, come from this particular factory or brand because it's local content. It's been developed locally. Why shouldn't our governments also make it mandatory to some extent, at least for government agencies and government bodies, to have those domains, schools that are government affiliated, and on and on and on. But I think there's a role to be played also by the government from that point of view, especially given that the registry usually is a public private partnership model that I think we see in many African markets for our CCTLDs. So it's a collaboration. It's coming together, kind of looking at the common cause and figuring out how do we increase uptake. But more importantly, I think at the end of the day, how do we almost create that sort of patriotic perspective where most businesses and individuals start to feel that this is my identity, this domain name is more authentically me and it represents my country and my brand, and I would much prefer that rather than being a plain vanilla generic international domain name, because it really doesn't clearly identify with who I am or who we are as a brand or business. Yeah, so that would be my answer. I think we also need to cultivate, as we've seen in South Africa, that internal determination, or should I call it local patriotic feeling, that people then are biased towards it without having to be forced to buy it because it's by law or government decree that you should have that domain name. I'm going to answer the two questions that came through on the Q&A. The first one being, can someone register my domain name when I've registered my business with company registrar? Absolutely, and this is something we call domain squatting. While we've been talking, I was just checking KenyaAirways.com. I don't know whether they finally bought it, because I worked with Kenya Airways many years ago trying to help them get that domain name back when I worked at another company. At the time, I think the party who owned it wanted something like, I think, $20,000 or $30,000, and I believe Kenya Airways refused to buy it at the time. They might have purchased it since, but what it means is that even to date, they have not been able to get their domain name back. Chances are because it's under .com, which is where it gets interesting when you have a local domain name. Because I know in Kenya, for instance, under Kenik and the .ke namespace, if somebody squatted in your domain name, you could very easily get it back, because they do have the protocols and the policies that allow you to present your official documentation. And if indeed there's a correlation between your actual domain name and what somebody purchased, which could be infringing on your copyright or your rights as a business, then Kenik would be able to give it back to you. And I think Richter probably is able to do the same. So we have these scenarios where, again, you can protect your identity locally in ways that you couldn't do it with an international domain name. There was also a second question here that was directed to me. Is there any benefit when I choose a local domain name over a generic one? I think I've somewhat answered some of that, but I'm increasingly believing that we now have a more informed and more digital consumer market across Africa and in our countries. During the pandemic, people who are not digital previously are now digital, and suddenly there's this anticipation and need for domain names. I think even we had in South Africa, they saw a major uptick last year. So yeah, I think we've reached a point where people are seeing more value in the local domain name over generic plain vanilla domain name. They want something that has identity, that has a clear connection to the origin or geography of the business or brand. And I think again it's inherently about starting to have a unique and personalized identity around your domain name.
Okay, thank you, Moses. I think there was another question addressed to Ivan. How easy is to register a .rw domain name?
Very easy indeed. I don't know how easy I could make it sound, but I would also like to roll back to the time where we had our EPP. So it was a bit challenging before. We have customers calling in, and actually I would give maybe even some sort of testimony where customers have chosen to pick other domains of our local brand simply because it was difficult, registrars are not available. So post EPP, it is really very easy. We do allow customers to do the registration on their own so easily, and even for renewal purposes. However, let's not rule out the fact that there are some customers who are busy and have chosen not to do this on their own. So the availability, again, back to the sense of registrars being there for their customers. Customers do call and say, yes, this is what I want. Can you have it for me ready right now? You see. So we do even offer that opportunity where even if the customer is not able to do it on their own or does not want to do it at the moment, we are still able to support and register this domain within time. So it is very easy. In case you want a domain, you could give it a try. Ask me to give it to you before the meeting ends, you will have it. So it is easy.
Thank you, Ivan. I have another question that was addressed to Lucky. where he mentioned that domainers, those who register or wait for domains to expire and snatch the names, is it a good practice? Some people from upon that behavior, what are the views of the panelists on this? So is it a good practice? Maybe you
Let
can
me hear
start.
from my other colleagues because I probably already mentioned
Yes.
them as a segment of a domain of a registrar. Remember, our registrars, you have a registrars that look at corporate. They do all the brand protection. They do all the intellectual, protection and of intellectual rights. And then you have your registrars that look at your wholesale market, and then others who do the retail. Then you have these guys, these domainers. They add value. They are looking at a name that has been in the market for 5 years or 10 years, and suddenly it's lost. They know it has value. They catch it and resell it. So they make the market dynamic. They add a different juice to the economics of domain names. They are bringing something that we don't have on the continent as much. We don't have this thing of addressing the commercial value of a domain name, and they are bringing this element that we are lacking. By the way, it's so interesting, whilst we are talking .com and .ke and .rw, in the US there is another name called .us. But if you compare in the US versus .com still stands out, But for us, it has a different thing because the Americans still see .com as theirs, and the revenue is still flowing to the US. So whichever way it is, it's still fine for them. But for us, it's different. So for me, domainers are a catalyst in this game. I don't know what my colleagues would think about it.
Moses, what do you think? Ivan, that will be the last question.
I think we're seeing a scenario now that there's a big trend happening in America right now called the NFTs. I don't know that any of you have heard of it before, but it's called non-fungible tokens. It's all based on the blockchain and what they call Ethereum, which is one of the cryptocurrencies. But basically, we have this new moment where digital assets, things like art, digital art selling for $63 million. We have people taking memes or videos from YouTube that are selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars because suddenly digital assets are valuable. And I'd like to use that same analogy to domain names, which possibly in a similar way, when you think about buying and selling land speculatively, depending on the value of a domain name, especially when it's quite generic or it's quite important, let's say in a specific market, it can have really astronomical value to it. So I think the trading of domain names is something that is quite immature in our CCTLDs. We've seen a lot of squatting. We've heard of deals where brands have paid significant amount of monies for domain names that are either generic or brand specific in order to acquire them. But basically, once the value of domain names in terms of day-to-day use and all become more and more popular than what we're seeing at the moment, then inevitably what will happen is there'll be highly coveted domain names that people will start looking for. And those who've been sitting on them and renewing them and managing them suddenly have the opportunity to sell them for a very high premium, depending, of course, on the demand and interest in that domain name. I personally was involved, I think, about 10 years ago in acquiring a domain name for a client who subsequently was not able to pay for it, only to get approached by a domain name broker who ended up buying it from us for something like $3,000 because that particular domain name was incredibly important for a brand owner who was launching a business and needed that domain name in the US. So you can start to see the potential there, that people could actually, just like they do trade at the stock market, have the opportunity to buy domains as digital assets, which could then be resold down the road for a very high premium, depending on the currency or importance of that particular domain name at that point in time. But I think what has happened in the last year with our digitization of all things in our lives because of the pandemic, the focus or the attention on things digital has been, probably elevated by a factor of 10 to the extent that now domains are seen in a much more significant way than they were in the past, especially when you're trying to maybe do a big piece of business and you're sending out emails, and people maybe will even tell you quite plainly that you can't send a Gmail, you need to have a domain name, or if you don't have a website, I can't do business with you. So I think we're going to have this scenario where the aftermarket and the trading marketplaces and domain name brokerages and so forth. I think we're kind of at that stage now where in Africa that is something that's going to become real. These will be the early days, but you can imagine in the next 2 to 10 years, this is going to be something where people will be owning and selling domains for millions of dollars, possibly, once digital assets become a currency of regular communication and engagement using things like the blockchain.
Okay, so guys, we have run out of time. Maybe I can just give 1 minute for as a closing remark for each panelist. We can start by you, Ivan. Then we will proceed with Moses and Lucky last. Maximum 1 minute.
Okay, let me take this opportunity as well to thank the organizers of this event. It has been very informative, at least from a .rw perspective. It is always good when we hear what our other brothers are doing in Africa, and we see we are definitely on the same path. So I do look forward to having more domains than .za. Lucky, we are coming for you. But I think eventually when all Africa has lots of domains registered, we do promote our brand and our identity. So we do look forward to that, and we really hope in terms of protection, in terms of understanding the value, I really think beyond just the brand, we are still missing a bit on that valuation. Why are others sold higher? So we do look forward to when our people understand the brand and the value. Thank you so much.
Over to you, Moses.
I think it's been a pleasure. I think we're just scratching the surface around domain names in our CCTLDs. I'm so excited because this is an area I've been involved in for more than 20 years. And for the very first time, you're starting to see numbers and acceleration around the importance and appreciation of domain names. We're still very, very far away from making them part of regular, what I call normal people conversation. It seems to still sit largely in the technology and digital communities, people who are practitioners and professionals in that space. But I think we're seeing a gradual transition to a more consumer level type of conversation around domain names, and even the distinction and appreciation of the distinction between a local or CCTLD type of domain versus a GTLD. So those nuances are now starting to become very clear. It's no longer just a gray area. People are starting to see the distinctions and the benefits, the pros and cons, and hopefully in that process we'll start to really realize the full potential of domain names within the context of Africa.
Thank you, Moses. Lucky?
Yes, thank you, colleagues. Thanks for that. And I think my parting shot is we need to focus on commercialization of our domain names, or building the commercial value, making sure that the end user understands what the commercial value is in a domain name. We also have a challenge of finding a conference, finding a common voice where we can partner, where we can work together. And I think we have a platform that we need to use. AFTLD is going to provide that mechanism for us to work together. We don't have to recreate another body, but let's make sure that we effectively use those existing bodies to address the issues of growth, to address the issues of the respect of our own CCTLDs. And also, I want to challenge the continent that we have an alternative. If you want a .com and if you think it gives you this international view, you have a .africa as an alternative to .rw. If you don't like .za, then you have .africa. That should be your alternative. And let's explore our reseller program to grow the market across the continent. And I think we need to push that triple R model. And I thank you again to the organizers of this event. And I think it's been worth it. And I hope the panelists and the participants have gained quite a lot from this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucky. We can give as well 1 minute to Barak as a representative from AFTLD. And if we have Bob still on the call, please just have 1 minute before we end our webinar.
Thank you very much, Grace. I just want to thank Richter under your leadership for actually convening this important conversation. The numbers at times do not matter, but the quality and the value of the conversation. And let's keep at it. These are not common conversations on our continent, but I believe let's keep the fire burning so that we can get more people on board. Africa, I think, is the only remaining frontier where the domain name business has not penetrated very well. And it's a great opportunity for all of us. But thank you. And to all the panelists, thank you very much for the insightful presentations. I look forward to the next webinar, either from Richter or any other CCTLD that was also on the call. Thank you very much, Grace.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is Barak, is Bob still around? Bob from ICANN. Okay, I think he has left the call. So thank you so much. I believe this was very insightful, very rich with content. I learned a lot from the experience of ZA and other panelists as well, that there is a lot that we need to do in our community, build trust, provide reliable services, talk to our client regularly. This is something that most of the time we leave it to registrars, as we believe that these are their customers. So this is something that I learned today. The call center, this is another idea that we can think of. So I have learned a lot from all panelists. So I just wanted to thank ICANN, even though Bob is not around. I thank so much AFTLD, and thanks everyone for your time. We have taken more than what we had projected to have, but this was very insightful. And for me, I wanted to stay even more, and we hear from more and we learn more. So thank you so much, and looking forward to have other session, either with Kenik, with other registrars and registries which were on the call. So thank you so much, and have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye.
Bye. Thank
Bye,
you.
Luke. Bye, Moses. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.